without explanation. They delete accounts, erase memories, and remove themselves entirely from lives once familiar. To the outside world, it seems abrupt, extreme, or even cruel. But for those who disappear, it is often an act of self-preservation, clarity, and liberation. The decision to disappear is rarely impulsive. It arises from accumulated experiences of betrayal, emotional exhaustion, manipulation, or the constant intrusion of external expectations. The mind reaches a threshold where engagement no longer serves growth, safety, or peace. Cutting off contact, erasing traces, and stepping away is a method of reclaiming control over one's energy, boundaries, and life narrative. In this video, we will explore the psychology behind disappearance, why some people feel compelled to sever connections, withdraw from digital footprints, and embrace solitude. We will examine the emotional, cognitive, and social mechanisms that drive this choice. Most importantly, we'll uncover strategies for understanding, respecting, and even emulating this behavior without losing yourself. Because stepping back is not weakness. It is strategy. And sometimes, the most powerful move is to remove yourself entirely from the chaos around you. The act of deleting everything and disappearing is rarely a simple reaction. It is a calculated, often subconscious response to emotional, psychological, and social pressures. People do not vanish merely out of whim. They do so because engagement, presence, and interaction have become liabilities rather than assets, because their energy, peace, and autonomy are under siege. At the core lies self-preservation. Constant exposure to toxic relationships, manipulative dynamics, or environments that demand emotional labor can exhaust even the strongest individuals. Over time, the mind associates interaction with vulnerability, risk, and depletion. Disconnecting, deleting, and disappearing becomes a way to protect the self, regain control over attention, and preserve mental stability. For some, it is the ultimate boundary, a line drawn in the sand that says, "I will not compromise my well-being for anyone or anything." Emotional fatigue amplifies the drive to vanish. Humans are wired to seek connection, yet repeated disappointment, betrayal, or conflict creates a paradox. The desire for attachment competes with the instinct for self-preservation. The mind reaches a breaking point where maintaining relationships or digital presence is more draining than liberating. Deletion and withdrawal are methods to resolve this tension, providing immediate clarity and relief. The psychology of closure is also involved. Some people disappear to avoid confrontation, manipulation, or judgment. Leaving behind digital footprints or emotional ties can feel like leaving the door open to intrusion. Erasing accounts, deleting conversations, and severing virtual connections creates finality, reducing the risk of being drawn back into unhealthy dynamics. It is an extreme but effective method to enforce boundaries and secure autonomy. Control over narrative is another powerful motivator. In a world where perception often outweighs reality, disappearance allows one to control the story. By removing access to personal life, history, or updates, a person limits misinterpretation, gossip, and unwanted interference. Absence becomes a tool of strategic influence, enigmatic, untouchable, and immune to external manipulation. Cultural and social factors reinforce this behavior. Modern life, with constant connectivity and social scrutiny, imposes relentless pressure to perform, respond, and maintain appearances. Some people react to this by creating distance, disconnecting, and preserving internal equilibrium. Deletion and disappearance are not escapes from life but rather tactical retreats, a recalibration of priorities, and a defense against emotional overexposure. Physiologically, this withdrawal reduces overstimulation. Digital interactions, social obligations, and emotional labor increase cortisol levels, heightening stress. By disappearing, the brain achieves balance, reducing dopamine dependency on external validation and regaining control over emotional responses. Ultimately, disappearing is a signal of self-mastery in its own right. It is the deliberate choice to prioritize peace, autonomy, and clarity over social expectation, approval, or attachment. Understanding this behavior requires seeing it not as abandonment, but as strategy, a protective, intentional, and often necessary act in a world that constantly demands more than it gives. The choice to delete everything and disappear is not rare. It is visible everywhere, quietly shaping human behavior in both personal and social contexts. Some leave relationships, friendships, or social circles without explanation. Others vanish from digital platforms, removing every trace of their presence. At first glance, it may seem abrupt or irrational, but in reality, it is often the culmination of repeated exposure to stress, conflict, and emotional strain. In personal relationships, people disappear when boundaries are repeatedly violated. They may have tried to communicate, to compromise, or to endure toxic patterns, only to find their efforts ignored or manipulated. Disappearing becomes a protective measure, an unspoken declaration that their energy, mental space, and emotional health are not negotiable. It is a final assertion of autonomy, a way to reclaim control when all other methods have failed. Social media amplifies the paradox. In a world obsessed with visibility, connection, and constant updates, the act of vanishing is radical. Some delete accounts to stop the cycle of comparison, judgment, and validation seeking. The omnipresence of curated images, opinions, and constant feedback can trap individuals in emotional loops. By removing access, they regain clarity and preserve mental equilibrium. The digital disappearance mirrors the psychological withdrawal, creating a controlled distance from the chaos. Professional and public contexts also illustrate the reality of this behavior. Some individuals step away from demanding jobs, high-pressure social environments, or networks that exploit their time and energy. Vanishing is often misunderstood as cowardice or avoidance, but in reality, it is a strategic retreat to regain focus, boundaries, and self-direction. Those who disappear often return with renewed clarity, purpose, and independence, stronger because they learned to prioritize themselves over external pressures. Physiologically, the withdrawal offers relief. Social and emotional demands increase cortisol and perpetuate stress cycles. Digital interaction triggers dopamine dependence on external validation. Disappearance interrupts these loops, allowing the mind and body to recalibrate. Absence becomes a form of self-care, a method to reclaim balance when constant engagement no longer serves well-being. Emotionally, the reality is stark. Disappearing is not about fleeing feelings, but about choosing which battles and relationships are worth attention. It is a method to preserve dignity, self-respect, and autonomy. People who delete everything and vanish are not rejecting life. They are refusing to be consumed by it. Their absence is a lesson in boundaries, self-mastery, and deliberate engagement. The truth emerges clearly. The world may perceive disappearance as avoidance or coldness, but the reality is deeper. It is often the only viable response when exposure, attachment, and demands threaten emotional stability. Understanding this behavior requires empathy and insight. Disappearing is not weakness. It is strategy, discipline, and self-preservation in a world that rarely values either. Understanding why some people delete everything and disappear is one thing. Learning how to harness this mindset strategically is another. Disappearance is not merely about leaving. It is about reclaiming control over energy, attention, and mental space. To adopt this approach in your own life, it begins with clarity of boundaries. Boundaries are not arbitrary. They define what you will tolerate, where your time is invested, and who has access to your emotional and mental energy. People vanish because their boundaries have been violated repeatedly, leaving no alternative but a radical retreat. To prevent the need for total disappearance, define limits early. Decide who, what, and which environments are worth your presence, and act consistently. Discipline in boundary enforcement is the first step toward untouchability. Next, cultivate emotional sovereignty. Those who disappear are not fleeing emotions, they are mastering them. Observe your feelings without letting them dictate behavior. Longing, obligation, guilt, and fear of judgment are natural, but unchecked, they compromise freedom. Practicing detachment allows you to interact selectively and deliberately, reducing the emotional pull of others while maintaining autonomy. Digital hygiene and intentional exposure are powerful tools. In today's hyperconnected world, constant alerts, notifications, and social media feeds demand attention and drain focus. Strategically control your presence. Limit digital exposure, filter communications, and remove sources of emotional noise. You do not need to vanish entirely to reclaim peace. Selective disappearance and curation achieve a similar effect while retaining necessary connections. Energy redirection is crucial. The act of disappearing frees time and mental bandwidth. Invest this energy in growth, skill development, self-care, or creative pursuits. Transform attention from external validation into deliberate action. The mind becomes less reactive, less dependent, and more capable of navigating complex social landscapes without depletion. Controlled unpredictability can amplify influence. When people cannot predict your reactions, your availability, or your attention, they assign value to your presence. Strategic absence is a subtle form of power. It enforces respect, cultivates scarcity, and strengthens perception. Disappearance, whether temporary or permanent, communicates autonomy without argument or explanation. Finally, embrace the paradox of solitude. Being alone does not equate to loneliness. True power lies in the ability to disengage without fear, to exist fully without dependence on approval or engagement. Those who master this transform absence into clarity, presence into choice, and freedom into strategic advantage. By integrating boundaries, emotional sovereignty, digital discipline, energy redirection, controlled unpredictability, and mastery of solitude, disappearance becomes not just a reaction but a strategy. You are no longer reactive to external pressures. You dictate engagement, influence, and availability. You are untouchable, deliberate, and unshakable. Deleting everything and disappearing is more than a dramatic act. It is the ultimate exercise in self-mastery. It is the conscious choice to reclaim control over your energy, your attention, and your mental space. For those who understand it, disappearance is not abandonment or weakness. It is strategy, discipline, and a declaration of autonomy in a world that constantly demands more than it gives. The power lies in deliberate disengagement. By stepping back, you protect yourself from manipulation, emotional fatigue, and unnecessary drama. You create space to observe rather than react, to prioritize growth over obligation, and to invest in what truly matters. Absence becomes a tool, not a loss, but leverage. It enforces respect, fosters clarity, and strengthens the mind against distraction and depletion. Solitude, when wielded intentionally, becomes a superpower. It allows the mind to recalibrate, emotions to stabilize, and purpose to sharpen. Disappearing teaches the world and yourself that your presence is not a given. It is earned, deliberate, and impactful. You move through life untouchable, guided by strategy rather than impulse, and defined by autonomy rather than circumstance. The lesson is clear. In a world that constantly seeks to pull, demand, and exhaust, the strongest move is often to step away. Protect your energy, preserve your clarity, and master your availability. Those who can disappear without fear, without regret, and without losing themselves have unlocked a form of power few ever understand. Remember, control your presence, own your boundaries, and wield absence like a weapon. In doing so, you are no longer at the mercy of others or circumstance. You are deliberate. You are untouchable. You are free.